On Drive Every Ferrari this week, for your viewing pleasure, I have this 512BB, the forerunner to the Testarossa and successor to the 365 GT4BB. This is a mid-engined flat 12 wedge-shaped Rosso Corsa Italian missile. And I'll tell you a secret, I've never driven one. This is the BB, which means it's the carburetted car. If you remember, there is also the BBI, which came later, which is fuel injected. All of which means on the Car Guys this week, I'm going to take a detailed look at the 512BB's history, its cool features, that engine, the interior, and I'm going to take this car out for a drive and give it a damn good thrashing. So if you fancy joining me for a few rounds with this boxer, let's get on with it. The 512BB was the mid-engined flat 12 supercar that superseded the less powerful and poorly selling 365 GT4BB, and it ran from 1976 until 1981 when it was replaced by the BBI, which lasted until 1984 when the Testarossa changed everything. The biggest difference between the two models was, yes, you guessed it, fuel injection instead of carburetors, hence the I. 512 boxers had a prolific racing history in the 70s and early 80s, notably in the Le Mans GT class, so these cars have real racing heritage, and that makes them very cool indeed. Ferrari made 929 512BBs, 101 in right-hand drive, and 1,007 BBIs, just 42 in right-hand drive, and neither were available in the USA. It took the launch of the Testarossa to open up that lucrative market. Those sales figures might look impressive today, but to put them into perspective, the 365 GT4BB sold just 327 cars, a third of the 512BB and BBI. No wonder Enzo couldn't wait to shoehorn the larger 4.9 litre engine into this car. The BB of the name, incidentally, has three possible meanings. The accepted version is Berlinetta Boxer because it has a flat 12 engine, but actually it's not a true boxer engine at all. Another is that the BB stands for Berlinetta Bialbero, which means twin shaft, referring to the car's dual camshafts. And then finally, there's the one claimed by the designer of this car, Leonardo Fioravanti, which is that the BB stands for Brigitte Bardot, because the car was so beautiful. That last revelation was uncovered by Road Rat magazine. This car is the 512BB and it belongs to a friend of the Car Guys, Simon, and it's a 1979 car with 53,000 miles on the clock, and it's in fabulous condition. So now let's have a look at this car in more detail. We'll do a full walk around of the exterior and the interior and show you why this is one of the coolest Ferraris in the world. The 512BB was a more muscular, wider-bodied, bigger-engined version of the original 365 GT4BB, and the big visual differences are the front bumpers with a chin spoiler on the later car, and the original had triple tail lights on either side and triple exhaust pipes, whereas you can see on this car that's now been reduced down to 2 round tail lights on each side and 2 exhaust pipes, so very different from the rear. Another big difference is that you've got these slats here instead of a plain black panel. The 512 also introduced NACA ducts on the rear arches to help cool the exhausts, and gained satin black slatted rear panel and vented engine lid. As you can see, this has got loads of open slats on the back to aid cooling of the engine, whereas the previous car, it was all covered over. Maybe one of the reasons why the early cars overheated. The chassis remained tubular steel, very much a case of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And as you can see, these cars feature distinctive Rudge knockoff wheels, and you got vented disc brakes, twin hydraulic circuits, independent wishbone suspension all round, coil springs and hydraulic shock absorbers. These cars were built to corner quickly and then blast off down the straight. I remember the exact moment that the 512BB went from being vintage, unreliable, old relic to a super cool Ferrari of the true connoisseur. And it was the Petrolicious video where the owner, Holger Schubert, kept his in his front room. Check it out if you haven't seen it. This is the legendary Ferrari 4.9 litre flat 12 engine, known as a boxer, even though it strictly isn't. It's naturally aspirated and it's known as the F112B, and it sits, as you can see, right in the back of this car, which means twin overhead camshafts, dry sump, and of course, old school triple choke Webers, 40 IF3Cs to be precise. And how about some performance stats? 0 to 60, 5.1 seconds. Develops 340 brake horsepower, that's 345 PS. Top speed, 188 miles an hour, that's 302 kph. It weighs just under 1,400 kilograms, and it's a 4943cc flat 12 naturally aspirated. Torque is 333 pounds-feet, which is 452 Newton meters. Now this car was good for 340 brake horsepower in standard form, but this one has recently had a full engine out and gearbox out service and rebuild, and it's now putting out over 400 brake horsepower. Right, now let's have a look inside this magnificent car. Now you pull this little latch here on the door just to open it. It's quite delicate, but it works really well. And wow, if you ask someone to imagine what a quintessential Ferrari interior would look like, this is it. Look at it. Beautiful soft leather, an array of crazy switchgear, and of course, that steering wheel and those dials. I cannot wait to take you through this one. First of all, when you climb over the sill, you see an incredible sight. Yes, that's right. The Italians have put the ashtray right here in the sill of the car, right down by the driver's seat. It's wonderful, just so that you could easily tap your cigarettes in there, flip it over and off you go. Now the interior of the 512BB is a special holy place. In this example, we've got black leather seats, soft leather, very comfortable. No real side support, but they certainly do the job well. We've got blood red carpets to match the Rosso Corsa exterior. I'm loving this piece of 70s design here for the speakers in the doors. That's fantastic. So sat in the driver's seat, I've got this 3-spoke steering wheel. It's quite thin, it's unadorned of course, and the spokes are so thin that it doesn't obstruct the view of quite the most enormous Ferrari dials that you see outside of one of those 60s classics. They are enormous. They're the size of dinner plates. On the left, you've got the Speedo, which goes up to 200 miles an hour, but of course this car's top speed is 188. I'm not sure I would want to do 188 in one of these, but the owner of this car has done at least 150, and he says at those speeds it gets quite bumpy. In the centre we've got the water temperature at the top and oil pressure down below it, and on the right hand side we've got the rev counter, which redlines at 7,000. And just like the Testarossa, they're orange and very stylish, but I think what surprises me the most is just how big they are. Down to my right, I've got a clock and also the oil temperature gauge. And over on the left here, 2 more dials. I've got the fuel level and battery condition. You've got 3 stalks, of course, in this car. 1 to operate the lights. So there you go. And 1 for indicators, and 1 on the right is for windscreen wipers. They actually feel more substantial than the ones in the Testarossa that came after this car. 2 small little fairly cheap looking vents in the middle here. That looks like they've got all the blowing power of a chinchilla with asthma, and actually that's probably why Ferrari then moved to having 3 much bigger vents in the future cars. But actually, considering this is a 1979 car and is therefore only 7 years younger than I am, and I'm really old, this car is in fantastic shape. Everything is fitted perfectly. The fit and finish in here is actually better than the first generation Testarossa that replaced it. Ferrari must have got just a little bit casual in the 80s. Behind me actually I've got a shelf behind the seats which you could put bags in and things, and there's also a tray up here at the back just in front of the window which looks out over that louvered engine lid. But the thing that dominates is all the switchgear. Now I remember this sight from when I picked up my F355 Spider from the dealership. When I actually bought that car, there was one of these parked right next to it, and whilst I was waiting for the paperwork to be done, I sat in it, and I remember just being fascinated and captivated by these little switches, these little pieces of Bakelite. This here is your section for your fans. So you've got the fan on here, and you've got the direction, and you've got your hazard warning light button there just stuck in the middle for no apparent reason. Yep, that still works. Then right in the middle here next to the gear stick, we've got the fog lights and we've got the choke. Yes, that's right. Remember, this is a carburetted car, no fuel injection, so you need a choke in order to make the mixture richer. So when you start the car, you've got more chance of a good spark and ignition of that engine. And then strangely, I've got to then reach all the way forward to access the air conditioning controls, which are right here at the front. No doubt supplied by an entirely different company, and no doubt had to be here to reduce the amount of wiring. So it just goes to prove that Ferrari clearly didn't learn anything about standardization in terms of cabin buttons, because the Testarossa, which followed this car, is just as bad. All sorts of crazy buttons and switches, none of them really the same, and scattered wherever you like. It's bonkers, it's impractical, it's probably costly, but at the same time, fabulous. A conventional handbrake with a Bakelite tip, and then we get obviously to the manual gearbox. Now, just like the Testarossas, this is a dog leg, so first is down to the bottom left. Make sure you don't accidentally put it to the top left or you will be going backwards rather quickly. And it's a 5-speed box with a black ball on the end. This is one of the rare right-hand drive cars. They only made 101 of these, and as such the gear stick is actually slightly unnaturally further over to the left than you like. You kind of have to reach for it, and to get into second actually it's a little bit of a stretch. That's of course because these cars were meant to be left-hand drive and Ferrari begrudgingly made right-hand drive versions. If you're in a lefty, this will fall naturally to hand right here. It will be perfect, but for us, yeah, it's a bit of a stretch. But overall, despite being 43 years old, this car seems in time warp condition. It's done 54,000 miles, but you really wouldn't know it. Everything is perfect. There's no stickiness. I don't think you actually had that problem in 70s cars, but everything seems really tight in here, and I get the feeling that this car may drive particularly well. But there's only one way to find out. Let's take it for a drive, shall we? Okay viewers, this is my first ever go in a 512BB. Now, I've heard a few tales of these cars. I will not be at the envelope of performance, I can assure you, so I don't really have to worry too much about this car's fearsome reputation for being a bit tricky on the limit. I am not expecting to be on the limit today at all, mainly because these cars now are so valuable, but also because the owner is in front of me in my car. Dogleg gearbox should hold no fear for anyone. Once you get used to it, your mind is acclimatized, you never worry about it again. There are two things you notice straight away upon getting in a 512BB. Number one, the startup sound is incredible. There is nothing like a carburetted Ferrari flat 12 to get you up in the morning and to really stir the senses. The second thing is that the clutch pedal is like pressing down on a block of granite. It really is super, super heavy. Probably the heaviest Ferrari clutch that I've ever encountered. But even in the first few meters, what you realize about this car is that the seating position is actually perfect. It's really comfortable. The steering wheel is really nice and weighty, and just pretty much the perfect size. I just feel like I am about to do some serious racing business. This is a seating position and ergonomics and dials that have been honed by motorsport, and you can really tell because it's just so natural. The steering is upright, but it's not like a bus. It's weighty but confidence inspiring. Those enormous dials really make sense because you can easily see them through the spokes of the wheel. Now, because it's a carburetted car, you shouldn't fear having to rev the engine. It loves to rev, it likes to rev. Using old terminology, it likes to clear its throat. Oh, wow. Oh, you get some nice pops and bangs on the overrun as well, which is exactly what you want. That's a characteristic again of carburetted cars, is you tended to have a lot of unburnt fuel, so you would get lovely pops and bangs naturally, unlike the engineered ones that you get in modern cars. This is proper old school, this is proper pops and bangs, actual explosions as opposed to synthesis. Well, the steering is alive in my hands, which is exactly what you want. I've got great visibility, lots of glass. I can easily see out over those engine slats and those two big black humps on the engine lid. I've got a good view behind me, I've got a good view all around. The wing mirrors are a little bit small, but they're sort of teardrop shaped. Oh, listen to the noise though. Listen to the noise of proper, full-on, old-fashioned, incredible carburetors. My goodness. I don't know why I was scared of this generation of car. I really don't. Oh my God. It sounds glorious. It's incredible. It's so much more guttural and mechanical than the Testarossas. Oh, of course you get quite a delay when you put your foot down because you've got no modern ECU, you've got no fuel injection, so it takes a little while for it to gird its loins and then get going, but when it does so in quite the most magnificent fashion. There's nothing like one of these proper old school flat 12s. I just can't get over how user-friendly, how balanced it is, how comfortable, just how natural it feels. It also feels considerably smaller than a Testarossa. I think that 80s excess probably got to Ferrari's head and they went a little bit too big with that car, because this feels diminutive and placeable and chuckable. Manual gate, very easy to use. You can see that the lever is bent over towards the driver, so although it is far away, on the move it's not as painful as you'd think. And actually brakes aren't too bad either. They're a bit stabby, but it sort of feels like they would stop you. Oh, listen to that. I was always put off by these older Ferraris because I thought they would just be a money pit. I thought they'd be hard to keep in tune all the time. They just scared me. But what owner Simon seems to convey with his car is that annually you're only talking probably about £2,000, which for a classic Ferrari really isn't that much. If you've got mechanics who are well used to dealing with these cars, it's not a problem. So as you can see, it's quite hot in here. The aircon is attempting to do its job, but it's in no way winning at the moment. It's 35 degrees out here. Fancy some beans? Are you ready? Second gear, flat 12, 512BB. more composed. There's so much more power and drama and emotion than you would ever think of a car of this era. I mean, let's face it, the late 70s is not known to be a great era for many things, perhaps punk, that's about it. But I'm just so impressed with the way this car drives. It just feels like a real brute of a car, this is. I know it may not be acceptable to say in this day and age, but this is a man's car. And just like the Testarossa, you've got time to enjoy the revs as they build. Just so evocative. I honestly don't know what people are on about when they say that this car is anything less than an absolute masterpiece, because look at it, just look how beautiful it is from the outside. It is an absolute dart, and when you realise that this car has been honed by motorsport competition, you understand it, you get it. It's very exciting. It's everything a Ferrari should be. And what's particularly interesting today on Drive Every Ferrari, and for me personally, is it has banished the demon of an older car being in the CarGuys garage. These always scared me. And they're not scary at all, are they? So, what do I like about the 512BB? Well, the exterior looks is very, 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 very pretty car. I love the slatted grille and the contrasting black sections on this model car. I think it looks so much better than the previous one. And it's just such a low, sleek, beautiful shape. I love the pop-up headlights. I love the driving position. I love the dials. I love the Rudge knockoff wheels. I think the wheels are really nice on this car. Absolutely classic. I sort of prefer this one being all body colour instead of two-tone as well, even though the two-tone is the model car that I've got. I love the noise. It's like having a caged Wolverine behind you. It's alive and snapping and snarling constantly. I love the interior, and I love the way it makes you feel. What do I not like about it? The pedal box is a bit small. The clutch is ridiculously heavy. So you've really got to properly put some weights in to build up your left leg. Perhaps mine's got a little bit lazy. Boot space is a little bit sparse. When you open up the front boot or trunk, you'll see there's not much space in there at all. But you do have a bit of space in here. And the air conditioning system, ventilation generally, is definitely not up to the job. I am absolutely roasting in here. So who'd have thought it? The 512BB has properly converted me to old school Ferraris. This is a lovely, lovely car. Congratulations, Simon. Thank you so much for lending me your car today. It's very generous given the value and how special this one is. I'm forever grateful for this, and I'm sure the CarGuys audience are grateful too. Having driven this car all day, I'm going to have to say I really, really like it. And on that bombshell, it's time to say thank you for watching the CarGuys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you like what we're doing, subscribe, leave comments and likes. There'll be another episode next week. And if you want to know how to get out of a 512BB, the door handle is under here. It's underneath the door.